Hey guys, Steinixos here. So today we'll be speaking about the equalization problem. Now, equalization is a process usually done in the context of a cross-anime or mangaverse discussion by people who realize that power systems in the different anime and mangaverses are obviously different, but for whatever reason, generally for their own convenience, they decide to treat these power systems as if they were the same. That is, they equalize them. Now, if you are having a cross-verse discussion and you decide to equalize the power systems just as a what-if scenario, then I think that's absolutely fine. I mean, I may even decide to do a couple videos like that just to have some fun. The actual problem with equalization, however, is that most people who equalize do not realize that there are actual non-superficial implications of equalizing power systems, and some people even go as far as to assert that all of these power systems are actually the same, or at least should always be treated as such, and that if you are a person who does not subscribe to this belief or this general way of doing things, then you are the one who is wrong and or delusional. So in this video, we'll be going over the obvious fact that power systems from different verses are obviously different, and why it is important to take these differences into consideration when having cross-verse discussions. And note, if you are a long-time viewer of the channel, then you know that I actually already made a video on this topic over 2 years ago. However, I was more or less just ranting at that point, and this is such an important topic that I think is fundamental to cross-verse discussions that I wanted to make a more structured dissection of it to see if I could tease out all or at least most of the nuances so I don't have to revisit it again. Also, if you are one of those persons who think cross-verse discussions are dumb and that we should not even be doing them at all because there's no way to come to definite answers or for some other reason, then firstly, I don't even know why you are watching this video in the first place. But secondly, even if no definite answers can be found, a lot of people like myself just enjoy thinking about and discussing these topics. It is absolutely fine if you do not like it or if you think it is a pointless endeavor. However, just because it's not something you enjoy or think should be done, that does not mean you should insert yourself and try to undermine the persons who enjoy doing it. But with that said, let us get right into it because we have quite a bit to cover. Now, before we dive too deeply into this topic, you need to have at least a rudimentary idea of the various power systems used in fiction. So at the most broad level, power systems can generally be divided into three main categories, and that is magic-based energy systems, non-magic energy systems, and non-energy-based systems. Now, magic-based power systems are probably the most common ones you'll encounter, especially if you read a lot of isekai manga like me. However, even among shonen, some fairly popular series which use a magic-based power system are Fairy Tail, Black Clover, and the 7 Deadly Sins. And the crux of a magic-based system is that there is some fundamental magic energy, which is usually called mana as seen in Black Clover. However, this fundamental magic energy is sometimes given other names, such as Ether Nano in Fairy Tail. And of course, this fundamental magic energy is the source of power used to carry out various different applications, which is what is called magic. Now, depending on the specific rendition of the magic-based system, to carry out magic may require, at least in part, the utilization of a spellbook such as seen in Black Clover, but this is not always the case, such as seen in Fairy Tail and 7 Deadly Sins. And then, the non-magic energy system describes all power systems where, like magic-based systems, there is some fundamental energy source that is used to carry out various applications. But unlike magic-based systems, the fundamental energy is not magic energy, it is something else. So for example, in Naruto, the fundamental energy is chakra, and of course, its applications are called jutsus. In Bleach, the fundamental energy is spiritual energy, which is technically called Ryoku, but this is often used interchangeably with Reishi, Ryatsu, and sometimes Ramyaku. But we'll go over the nuances of the Bleach naming conventions in a different video. For now, just know that the fundamental energy in Bleach is spiritual energy, and its applications we can more or less call spiritual techniques. In One Piece, the fundamental energy is Haki, or if you're from Wano, it is called Ryu. And the applications are also called Haki, but to avoid confusion, we'll call them Haki techniques. In Jujutsu Kaisen, the fundamental energy is cursed energy, and its applications can be called Jujutsu or Jujutsu sorcery. In Hunter x Hunter, the fundamental energy is called Nen, and its applications we'll call Nen techniques. In World Trigger, the fundamental energy is called Trion, and its applications are technically called triggers, but for simplicity, we'll call them Trion techniques. And I'm sure you can think of other examples. Then, the non-energy based system category is for all other power systems that do not have some underlying fundamental energy. For example, quirks from My Hero Academia are more or less the result of genetic mutations. There is no specific underlying energy, like magic energy or spiritual energy, which fuel the abilities of quirks. Similarly, Devil Fruits from One Piece is another power system that again more or less operates on genetic mutation. There is no fundamental underlying energy that fuels Devil Fruit abilities. Other popular examples of this would be negations from Undead Unlock and abnormalities and minuses from Medaka Box. Now obviously, the person's stamina or other such physical factors are usually the limiting factors for these type of powers. But a basic rule of thumb is if you encounter a power system for which you can't think of some named fundamental energy that fuels the abilities, then it probably falls into this category. Now with that understood, we can start to get into some of the main points that come up around the equalization of power systems. Let us start off with one of the most common arguments I encounter, which I dub the universal energy argument. This, at its core, is usually phrased something like, yeah, even though they're all from different verses, with a multitude of verse-specific considerations, regardless of this, they're all still just energy, so they should all still just be treated the same. Now frankly, to me, this is akin to a preschooler's level of engagement with the ideas. Again, with even a cursory level of understanding of power systems, you'd at least be aware that even though a fire attack from a fire quirk user from My Hero Academia, for example, is energy, just casually putting that in the same category as a fire jutsu from the Naruto series, for example, does not necessarily make any sense, given that the latter is from an energy-based system while the former is not. However, even though at an abstract level, you might understand factually that this is the case, at a more practical level, you might not understand why this is important. So to illustrate this, let us work through some examples. In the manga, From Now On I Will Become the Father of the Mage, the main character specializes in magic nullification due to a very high magic resistance. Thus, as you would imagine, magic attacks generally do not work against him. However, because everything is obviously not magic, when faced with a non-magic attack, like a natural lightning blast from a natural lightning dragon, the main character can still be hurt by this because again, natural lightning is not the same as magic lightning. And this is basically the core reason why casually trying to treat all power systems as if they are the same not only does not make any sense, but in many of these instances, you are not only overextending the effects of a particular system, but you are also even contradicting the source material. But again, you may not read as many niche manga like me, so you may think I'm just drawing from the extremes. So let us consider an example from a more popular series, Naruto. So as we already mentioned, in Naruto, the underlying energy is chakra. And this energy known as chakra is a specific energy that flows through every individual in the Naruto world through a cardiovascular light network known as the Kairakuke that is integrated with every organ of their body down to a cellular level. And this specific energy known as chakra is what they use to carry out their jutsus. So for example, the ninjutsu known as Chidori is just a chakra-based technique that involves the materialization of normal raw chakra, then changing this normal raw chakra to lightning nature chakra, and also changing the chakra's form so that it discharges like lightning. So Kakashi isn't actually holding lightning in his hand, he's instead holding chakra that has been manifested and changed to behave like lightning. And a fireball jutsu isn't actually fire, it is chakra that has been manifested and changed to behave like fire. With that understood, we can take a look at a character like Izami, who is able to absorb the chakra of regular chakra-derived ninjutsu. But as we already explained, most chakra-derived elemental ninjutsu isn't the real element. So Kizame obviously could not absorb Might Guy's Hiradura, which is literally real wind that is highly compressed. It is not a chakra-derived winjutsu. Similarly, Kizame could not absorb Might Guy's flame punches, which is real fire derived from Might Guy literally setting the air on fire through friction generated by punching very fast. Thus again, the real thing, not a chakra-derived replica. And similarly, 6-path characters like Madara and Obito are immune to and can nullify regular chakra-based ninjutsu like Amaterasu. But again, being that regular chakra ninjutsu isn't the real element, 6-path characters like Madara was not immune to and could not nullify the first step of Might Guy's Even Elephant, which again is just a real wind that is highly compressed. Madara even specifically highlights how dangerous it would be to get hit by more of these compressed air punches. So trying to equalize chakra-based elemental ninjutsu with attacks from Logias from One Piece, for example, literally makes no sense. Because we know that Logias are not using chakra-derived or mana-derived or some other derived replica of these elements. No, a Logia's lineage factor or their bloodline element, that is the literal blueprint of their life itself, was altered at a fundamental level to literally make them into a certain natural element. So as stated specifically in the One Piece manga and also stated by the author himself, and again reiterated in Road to Laugh Tale Volume 3, they are literally the true version of the element found in nature. So trying to equalize a Logia's attack with an elemental ninjutsu is literally changing what a Logia is down to a fundamental level, and this equalization would literally just be making an attack which we know should work as established by the Naruto lore itself. Equalization would be going against the Naruto lore and making the true element not work. And again, this distinction is even discussed in Boruto, where it is emphasized that Jigen can't use the normal Okutsu Karma Chakra absorption ability on real flames, because again, real flames are not the same as chakra-based flames. Thus, a chakra absorption technique obviously would not work on something that is not chakra, which is why he had to use a size manipulation technique to shrink the flames instead. So again, just because two things are energy and may even behave similarly, that does not mean that at a fundamental level they are the same thing or should be treated as such in non-superficial analyses. The next argument that usually comes up is one which I typically refer to as the composition argument, and it is usually phrased something like, because this energy is derived from other energies, it should be treated the same as the other energies from which it is derived. Now this argument is typically only really brought up when discussing chakra, and that is because unlike most other energy-based systems, chakra is actually a composite fundamental energy. That is, it is actually derived from the combination of even more basic energies. So in the Naruto world, there are 3 fundamental energies. The first is called physical energy, which is an energy that is collected from each of the body's cells and can be increased through training, stimulants, and exercise. The second is called mental energy, which is also sometimes called spiritual energy, and this is derived from the mind's consciousness and can be increased through studying, meditation, and experience. And the third energy is called nature energy, and this is a usually imperceptible external energy that exists in nature throughout the Naruto world. So regular chakra is a specific energy formed when an individual combines their internal, physical, and mental energies together. Then sage chakra is a separate specific energy formed when an individual combines their internal, physical, and mental energies together with the external nature energy. So this argument usually comes up in something like a cross-verse battle of Naruto against Bleach, for example, where you'll typically hear something like, because the truth-seeking orbs can negate regular chakra-based ninjutsu, and chakra is in part spiritual energy, they should then be able to negate the spiritual power-based attacks from the Bleach verse. And understand, this is not even a fringe argument. This was one of the main arguments used in Death Battle's Madara vs Aizen video, which tilted the scales in favor of Madara. Now, this one is a little harder to parse through for 2 main reasons. Firstly, your intuition will likely tell you that that this reasoning makes sense. Thus, to see why this is not necessarily the case requires you to go against your intuition. Secondly, separate from chakra, there are not really any common examples of composite energies. So unlike with the first argument, it is a little more difficult for me to just show you a direct one-to-one comparison here. However, separate from just going, oh, that is just a fallacy of composition or division, I do think that there are a couple of examples that can help us show why this argument from composition falls apart at its core. So firstly, if you read or watch Fairy Tail, then you know that magic is actually not the only power system. There is also curses. And because curses is technically a separate power system that is not magic, anti-magic obviously does not work on curses. However, even though we can clearly see that curses and magic are different, at least in some properties, they are still both actually derived from the same primordial source. That is, the so-called one true magic, with curses just being one divergent classes of this one true magic. And by the way, this one true magic is supposedly the emotion of love, which is not even that far-fetched, given that curses are said to be fueled from negative emotions, and there have been multiple occasions in Fairy Tail where it is even explicitly confirmed that emotions can be converted into magic energy. So when it is said that Fairy Tail is the power of friendship manga, you should be taking that quite literally. But let us not digress. The point I'm trying to illustrate with this example is that saying that two things should be treated the same simply due to a common origin or an intersection of component parts is a bit misguided. But again, let us see if we can expand our understanding of this by using another example, this time with cursed energy from Jujutsu Kaisen. So as we already mentioned, cursed energy is the fundamental energy in Jujutsu Kaisen, and cursed energy is basically an energy formed from the negative emotions produced by humans. Now, plants typically do not have cursed energy, or as Hanami says, plants do not embrace cursed energy. However, plants do have life energy, which could mean a variety of things. But life energy in the non-specific sense most commonly refers to spiritual energy, and Hanami is able to convert this life energy of plants directly into cursed energy. So just because cursed energy can be formed from life energy, should we now automatically assume that they should be treated the same or have the same properties? Like, no, obviously not. You even just literally heard that plants don't embrace cursed energy, yet you'd be saying at base they're full of the thing they don't embrace? Like, come on now. Similarly, still within Jujutsu Kaisen, a more complex yet a more clear example of this is cursed energy versus positive energy. Positive energy is formed directly from cursed energy via reverse curse techniques through a process akin to multiplying a negative by another negative to produce a positive. Yet the properties of positive energy are so different than that of curse energy that despite this being its origin, curses bodies, for example, which are composed entirely of curse energy, if exposed to positive energy, it can compromise the integrity of their cursed energy body and destroy them. Now, probably an even more clear example of this is from Black Clover with Ki, a separate power system from magic that basically represents the life energy of a thing. So, as we learned with the Zetten, Ki can actually be converted into magic power, which by now you should have realized is pretty standard for almost all power systems that are not already explicitly stated to be based on life or spirit energy. Like as we already mentioned, chakra is formed from life or spirit energy, cursed energy can be formed from life or spirit energy, and again magic, even from other series like the 7 Deadly Sins, or that time I got reincarnated as a slime, can be derived from life or spirit energy particles. So now ask yourself, just because Ki can be converted into magic, should we now just automatically treat Ki and magic as the same thing? So anti-magic should now automatically cancel out Ki? Again, you know this obviously makes no sense. And Ki being separate from magic, and thus being able to coexist with anti-magic, was one of the main principles of Asta's character as a whole from even early in the series. As a matter of fact, Asta is now able to just outright convert magic into anti-magic, or at least give anti-magic properties to magic. Thus, should we now automatically treat magic and anti-magic as the same thing? Again, I'm sure you'd understand how silly it is to say this. Now, I could give more examples, but needless to say, by now I think it should be clear why this composition argument should not be used as a general rule, but rather these cases require a more individualized consideration. The next argument which usually comes up is what I like to call the function argument, and it is usually phrased something like, these power systems have similar functions, therefore we should treat them the same. Now again, this is one of those arguments where even with just about 5 seconds of reflection, you'd see how silly this argument is. One particular salient example which helps to illustrate this is from the Black Clover verse. So, as we already mentioned before, magic is the main power system in Black Clover, and like almost every other power system, it has a sensing function, where you can sense the presence of others by sensing their magic energy. And this is because basically everyone in the Black Clover verse has magic energy, everyone except for Asta, who does not have and cannot use magic. So again, obviously he cannot do magic sensing. However, because there exists an entirely separate power system called Ki, which is a type of bodily produced energy, which everyone, including Asta, has, Asta can actually sense people through Ki sensing, even though he can't sense them through magic sensing. And the importance of this distinction goes even deeper, because for example, as we saw in the battle against Patri, opponents who only know magic sensing are not able to sense Asta because he has no magic, but Asta on the other hand is always able to sense these opponents through Ki sensing because everyone's body produces Ki. This allows for interesting battle tactics like Asta being able to do a sneak attack on Patri. And again, just as a callback to the composition argument which we covered earlier, as we have already highlighted, Ki can be converted into magic power. But as we see in this interaction with Patri, a person who only knows magic sensing is not just automatically able to sense Ki, because again, despite the convertibility, Ki and magic are still separate energies. So again, saying that different power systems should be considered the same simply because they have similar functions is one of the most ridiculous arguments you could make, and we won't waste any more time approaching it from that angle. However, this particular argument hits at something much deeper that is actually central to the equalization problem. You see, at the root of this argument, and almost every instance of equalization, is not actually the belief or even the desire to truly treat different power systems as if they were the same, but rather it is usually done to gain or at least retain a specific function of one of the competing power systems. So for example, almost every power system has a strengthening or reinforcing type function that drastically increases physical defense and or the power of an attack. For example, in One Piece, this is called armament haki. In Bleach, we can see this with techniques such as blood vein and blood artery used by Quincy's, and the hero technique used by Arankars. In Naruto, you can see this through the strengthening of weapons with regular chakra or the inherent strengthening of the body with Sage chakra. In Black Clover, this can be seen with general reinforcement magic as well as mana skin. In Hunter x Hunter, this at a basic level is called Ren, but there are more advanced levels like Ko and Ken, and so on. However, something that routinely comes up when Logias from One Piece are brought up in a crossverse setting are many people claiming that because all power systems share this strengthening type function like armament haki, we should then assume that characters from other verses should then automatically also be able to damage Logias. But hold on, you should appreciate that this makes no sense. With armament haki, it is not because the attack or the individual gets stronger that the user is now able to interact with a Logia's true body. No, it is because, in addition to the strengthening function, armament haki also provides a separate but baked-in interaction function that allows its user to interact with the true bodies of these normally invulnerable Logias. So when a person invokes equalization of haki and chakra, for example, it is not usually because they actually believe these energies to be the same, but rather it is to get a certain function from armament haki and give it to the chakra user. And you'll note, This makes no sense for multiple reasons. Firstly, if you think about it with an example where the functions are more separate from the get-go, it becomes pretty clear how fallacious this is. So for example, Haki and Chakra, like almost every other power system, provides a sensing function, where with Haki, this is called observation Haki, and with Chakra, we can call this Chakra sensing or sensory jutsu. Now, if you are a particularly proficient observation Haki user, then you'll be able to not only just predict what an opponent will do, but you will also in fact be able to literally see into the future, like you even literally hear the words that are spoken. Now, if a person said to you that Chakra and Haki both share a sensing function, therefore Naruto, for example, should automatically gain the future side function of Haki, being able to literally look into the future. Like, would that make any sense to you? The answer is no. That argument is obviously absurd, and this is exactly what is done when trying to automatically co-opt the interaction function of armament Haki with equalization. And this can be viewed at an even more local level to make it more clear. For example, chakra sensing at baseline allows you to sense the chakra of others. However, if you are particularly skilled at it or just have a particular proclivity, then you can gain added functions like Naruto, who can use it to sense not only chakra but also emotions. And surely you'd understand, it is silly to say that just because a person is able to sense chakra, that they should automatically be viewed as having the emotion sensing function. And this literally even comes up in the series, where by using chakra sensing, Killer Bee and Yamato were not able to pick up the fact that Kizami was among them, due to the fact that Kizami, who was hiding in Samehida, had the same chakra signature as Samehida. However, Naruto, by being able to sense negative emotions, which is entirely separate from chakra, was able to pick up Kizami. The second reason this makes no sense is that on many occasions it is demonstrably the case that in normal situations that the power system does not have the function that they're trying to gain from equalization. For example,
the closest thing to a Logia in the Naruto world is Suigetsu when he uses his water release technique. This technique allows him to transform his body into liquid form and to change back from liquid form to solid form at will. So he isn't fundamentally water like a real Logia, but he can somewhat simulate the Logia state while he has chakra. Now we have clearly seen where Sage Transformation Jugo, whose clan can naturally use regular Senjutsu, which remember is Sage Chakra derived jutsus, and Sage Chakra is mental energy, physical energy, and nature energy. So a fully powered Senjutsu strike from Jugo to water form Suigetsu did absolutely nothing at all to Suigetsu. As a matter of fact, from the dispersed water, Suigetsu forms a blob around Jugo's head, drowning him, and then just reforms, completely unharmed. And remember, this is the same Jugo who shared his Sage Chakra with Sasuke, allowing Sasuke to fight against the Ten-Tails Jinchuriki form Obito with his Susanoo, so it doesn't get nullified as it did before by the 6 paths ability to nullify a regular chakra-based ninjutsu.
This can also be seen in Fairy Tail, where you have Juvia, a water Logia type character, that clearly shows that just because it is a magic based attack, that does not necessarily mean it will automatically bypass the Logia like invulnerability effect. And Fairy Tail gives us yet another example, because there's yet another power system separate from magic and curses called Spirit Arts, in which the fundamental energy particle is called Spiria as compared to Ether Nano of magic. And of course, just because magic strengthening exists, this does not mean you can automatically hit the true essence of spirit art life forms. And I know that a lot of people's brains seemingly just shut off and go into attack mode when you try to actually dissect the nuances of these topics, rather than just reaffirming what they already believe or want to be true. So because of that, let me try to be very clear. We are not talking about things like elemental weaknesses. That is a separate topic. Nor am I saying that there are not specific instances in these various series where it may go through for whatever reason. Nor is my general point to say that these power systems could not form some application or techniques that has this Logia-like interaction function like armament hacking in some manner. That would be silly, because almost all power systems are usually sufficiently broad enough that in theory they could be used to replicate the functions of any other power system. For example, as we already mentioned, in Fairy Tail, just having magic does not necessarily automatically allow you to be able to hit the true essence of spirit arts based life forms. However, if you have a technique like Irene's conceptual enchantment, then even a magic user is able to bypass this normal invulnerability, allowing them to actually do damage to the true essence of these spirit art based life forms. And the third reason this falls apart is because after they have gained or retained the specific function that they want from a power system from equalization, most people don't ever think about what this should also mean in the opposite direction. So for example, if we equalize Haki and Chakra, and Naruto characters are now granted this armament Haki function or technique, allowing them to interact with and hurt Logias, what should this equalization then mean for the One Piece characters?
Like logically, wouldn't the One Piece characters then also obviously need to get the use of jutsus, which are the chakra techniques? So Aokiji should now be able to use his haki to produce fire-style jutsus, and Akainu should now be able to use his haki to produce water-style jutsus, and Kizaru's haki, well, let's just say it allowed him to unlock the Mangekyo Sharingan. Like, people don't realize you can't equalize in one direction. There are obvious implications for both sides.
However, I feel like this careless culture of equalization has come about not only due to various people's personal wants to push certain agendas or even just general frivolity of thought, but rather, I feel like one of the primary reasons at the core of all of this is a fundamental misunderstanding, or rather, a lack of appreciation of the importance of mechanisms. And it is pretty weird because at the most basic level, almost everyone easily understands how important mechanisms are. So for example, Brook from One Piece is a skeleton, and as such, he has no organs. Thus, it is pretty easy to appreciate that if attacked with most normal, non-corrosive type poisons, then they would not do anything against him because he has no organs or cells for the poisons to act on. Like, the importance of this mechanistic consideration is almost common sense in thinking about Brook versus poisons, right? Similarly, it is almost equally obvious that an attack like an ocular genjutsu, whose activation sequence requires injecting chakra through an opponent's eyes, whether through direct, that is, intersecting gaze, as with a regular ocular genjutsu, or even through indirect, that is, non-intersecting gaze, as with the Mangekyo Sharingan. It then obviously makes sense that the ocular genjutsu would not work if the user can't gain some line of sight into the opponent's eye to inject the chakra, which is why Kakashi told Kurenai and Asuma to close their eyes when Itachi was going to activate the Tsukiyomi, or if the ocular genjutsu is used against a character with an abnormal eye structure, which is why Sasuke's genjutsu did not work against Zansoru because he has a mechanical eye. But again, this is just as obvious as an attack like Ichiya from Fairy Tail, Poison Perfume, which obviously would require at least organs of smell to get into the body to work, would thus then obviously not work on a character like Wall, who is a machine that does not have nasal receptors to begin with. So then it becomes a bit more clear why when thinking about these complex topics like genjutsu in a cross-verse setting, we can't just carelessly say things like the Uchihas solo all other verses, because at a mechanistic level, for example, we know that one of the core facts about genjutsu is that it typically requires an opponent to have the specific energy known as chakra. That is what is controlled in the opponent's body to achieve its effects. So if a person does not have chakra, then in the absence of some other mechanism of effect, there's no reason to think that most genjutsu would even work in the first place. This is similar to how it would not make any sense to say that scale magic from Black Clover solos all other verses, because again, we know that one of the core facts about how scale magic makes a person weaker is by shrinking their magic or mana amount or capacity. Thus, if a person does not have magic to begin with, like Asta. Then, in the absence of some other mechanism of action, the scale magic would not be able to make that person weaker. And again, like duh, when speaking about complicated topics, of course there may be some fringe exceptions or special situations. So for example, Inzangi is classified as a genjutsu, but unlike normal genjutsu, it is not directed at an opponent per se, but rather it is directed at the world itself to achieve a sort of reality warping effect, where it treats any negative events that happens to its user, such as injuries or even the user's death, as if they did not happen in the first place. That is, as if they were mere illusions. So, controlling an opponent's chakra is obviously not part of the mechanism of action of Inzangi. But just because an exception like Inzangi exists, that does not suddenly disprove that most genjutsu work by controlling an opponent's chakra. Like, that is just silly. And even ignoring the chakra manipulation mechanism principle of genjutsu, another interesting genjutsu related question, for example, is with the Infinite Tsukiyomi, where it is actually stated that it does not work on dead characters like the reanimated Hokages. So just focusing on this facet alone, that would imply that it should not work on other dead characters like the Shinigami from Bleach. Or is there some specific difference between a Bleach Shinigami type of dead versus a reanimated Naruto character type of dead that would make it work on one and not the other? But anyway, this video is not to hash out the intricacies of genjutsu. I merely used it because it is one of the more complicated topics that often comes up in the crossverse space. Plus, I've already made a video on this topic of genjutsu, which I might eventually rework as prep for my Aizen vs Madara video, which I'll eventually do. But again, let us not digress. The point of this video is to illustrate that in many occasions, careless equalization is not actually representative of how the interaction between power systems would go, and in many instances, it is literally going against even the source material itself. And again, I understand. Many times it is frustrating that on proper analysis, a character you may favor may just not stand a chance against another character from another verse simply because they lack certain techniques. But again, these imbalances just naturally exist both within specific verses as well as across different verses as a whole. For example, in One Piece, a character who does not know armament haki, which is the majority of the One Piece world, is just as helpless against most Logias as everyone else from every other verse who does not have an armament haki equivalent technique. Or in Fairy Tail, against the spiritual arts life forms, a character who does not have spiritual arts or a spiritual arts equivalent technique is just as helpless as everyone else from every other verse who does not have this. Or in Naruto, if you are a character who is dependent on regular chakra-based techniques, like the majority of the characters in the series, and you meet someone like the Six Paths characters, whose abilities makes it such that regular chakra-based techniques do not work on them, then it is obviously unfair, but it just is what it is. The character's particular skill set is just not applicable for the particular situation that they are in. And again, just to reiterate, as I said in the beginning of this video, if you are equalizing power systems because you think it is a cool what if scenario, then I think that's absolutely fine. But trying to erase these imbalances and other such nuances simply because you don't like them, or even going as far as to assert that they do not even exist in the first place, is a bit silly. And at a general level, if you want an accurate representation of how a battle between characters of different verses would or could go, then you obviously need to actually carefully consider each character and the nuances that come along with the interactions of different power systems. But anyway, that's the video, guys. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. But anyway, see you guys next time.